The final weeks of our presidential campaign at times seem ripped from the pages of a Tom Clancy novel. The Obama White House says it now has firm evidence that Russia is behind the hacks that have brought Democratic Party and Clinton campaign emails into the public eye. President Obama is weighing what his spokesman calls, quote, a proportional response. And a joint statement from the Director of National Intelligence and the Department of Homeland Security says bluntly, quote, only Russia's senior-most officials could have authorized these activities. We not only have every corner of the campaign covered, one of CNN's best happens to be at the Kremlin today. CNN's Christiane Amanpour sat down with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Not true, he says, while working in a little swipe at President Obama.
Well, it's flattering, of course, to get this kind of attention for a regional power, as President Obama called us some time ago. Now, everybody in the United States is saying that it is Russia which is running the United Nations presidential debate. It's flattering, as I said, but it has nothing, you know, to be explained by the facts.
I mean, again, this would be hilarious if we weren't talking about what the White House insists is firm evidence that another state, another government, and a not-so-friendly government at the moment, is interfering in a U.S. election. You heard the swipe back. He calls us a regional power there. This is nuts.
Yeah, it is nuts. I mean, Trump's response to this is what, hacking? Or maybe it's some 400-pound guy who's sitting on a bed somewhere. And you can see that the Hillary Clinton campaign, to divert away from what these WikiLeaks are saying about her campaign, particularly in the primary, they really want to focus on this. And it's scary and it's dangerous. And you would think if this was a different campaign, there would be a lot of alarm around this and much more focus on it. But given the nature of this campaign, it's sort of just seen as a political ploy by both sides.
And you're right. They don't acknowledge the authenticity of these emails. And they should be out explaining. It wasn't as bad as Donald Trump says, but why is Brian Fallon emailing with people at the Justice Department in the middle of this investigation? What did Chelsea Clinton mean when she wrote in an email that she thought people at the Clinton Foundation were cashing in on her father's name? So those are things the Clinton campaign should be explaining, not just saying, oh, these are hacked emails. We can't say if they're true or not. The guy whose emails these all come from is John Podesta. Used to work in the Bill Clinton White House. Now is the Hillary Clinton campaign chairman. He came back on the plane last night to explain it this way.
Why? Why would there be this active engagement by the Russians and the DNC and other Democratic organizations in my private email account? Well, I think you could start by looking at the positions that Mr. Trump has taken during the course of this campaign. One more consistent with Russian foreign policy than U.S. foreign policy.
So he's trying to lay this all on that, Donald Trump is in cahoots with the Russians, or at least he's on the same page as the Russians, and that's why the Russians are doing this.
We spoke with Vladimir Posner, a longtime Russian state broadcaster, the other day who had his own theory of this, and he admitted he believes that Putin thinks he could push Trump around much more easily, and yet still denied that he believes Putin wants Trump to be president because he doesn't think that Trump is stable. A deeper question here, though, gets to the question of who do you believe? The Clinton campaign ought to really have a home run response to this. Who do you believe, the U.S. government or the Russians who denied this? And you would think Americans would automatically believe the government, but we're in an era where that's not necessarily true. People are not necessarily going to take the word of intelligence agencies. And so it's not insane for the Trump campaign to make their argument.
At the same time, Clinton is kind of gliding past some of this because they do have that to hang it on, because they can say, we can't verify any of this, but they're also not denying it.
Right.
And that is because Donald Trump has made the statements that he's made about favorable to Russia, and that is because we have seen several hacks where the Russians were suspected to be behind them, and because the government itself, Obama, has come out and said that we think that this is being orchestrated from the highest levels. Now, the president wouldn't say that if they've been studying this for weeks. There wasn't some very high level of information that is actually happening.
Retaliation.
To your point, remember, Trump went on. It was Larry King, but the show is sponsored by Russian television, paid for by Russian television. Trump went on Russian television in the middle of one campaign controversy when this was coming up before, and our Jim Sciutto did a great report yesterday about Donald Trump bringing something up at a rally. I'm going to play it for you here, and then I'll explain on the other side why it's, shall we say, not true.
Blumenthal writes a quote. This just came out a little while ago. Clinton was in charge of the State Department, and it failed to protect the United States personnel at an American consulate in Libya. He meant Benghazi. If the GOP wants to raise that as a talking point against her, it is legitimate. In other words, he's now admitting that they could have done something about Benghazi.
That is not a Sidney Blumenthal, longtime Clinton advisor and friend, email. That is from a Russian report, and the quote is lifted from a Newsweek story, and it is purported in this one, the only place it was reported was in a Russian outlet. It was reported as a Sidney Blumenthal email, and the Republican nominee for President of the United States, who in 27 days could be president-elect, is quoting from crazy Russian reports that are wrong, flat out wrong. So if you want to be a conspiracy theorist, it's not the first time he's done this either. Why is Donald Trump getting his news from Russian sources?
Even if you don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. And this is really interesting. It points to the complexity of this story and the problem Republicans may have in mining it. We do have all these communications that John Podesta had, but it's complicated interpersonal relationships. What I've seen so far, there's no grave smoking gun. There are fascinating details, awkward details, facts like a dozen Hillary Clinton advisors argued over whether she should tell a joke, which doesn't make the candidate seem all that authentic, but there's nothing that is that devastating or that pierces through, like, say, a tape of a candidate talking about assaulting women. There's nothing like that.
Bragging about assaulting women.